Hello everybody, my name is Nathaniel Morgan.
And I'm Ryan Goldberg.
This is our case competition analysis and recommendations.
So, little agenda, we're going to talk about a little bit of an industry analysis. We're going to go through your company overview. Nate's going to talk a little bit about some rate making decisions we made. Talk about some of the reserving methodology we used, and go through some recommendations we have for the company. So as some of the groups have talked about, loss ratios. This is the industry analysis of loss ratios for P&C over the past 7 years. As you can see, it's right around 60%. Basically what that means is that 60% of premiums go to pay out claims. So another key ratio that they use is the expense ratio. Basically this means the percent of premiums that are used for overhead, for paying people's salaries, basically expenses of the insurance company. And these hover a little lower than 30%. So what they really care about is the combination of the two of them. And as you can see, these are a bunch of different lines of P&C insurance. There's private passenger auto, homeowners, inland marine, a bunch of different stuff. And these all get up close to the 100% mark. And we're focusing on homeowners, which on average was about 104%. So combined ratio, less than 1. It's kind of logical. There's inherent profit. So your money's not going, you're not using all your money to pay out the combination of expenses and claims. So there's money left over, and that money is your profit. But if it's over 1, you're paying out more in the expenses and in your claims than you're taking in premiums. So this means there's no inherent profit. But the catch-22 is that since you're receiving premiums now and paying out the claims later, that doesn't mean you can't profit. With investment, there's investment opportunities that can allow you to profit from combined ratio over 1. So for example, you say you collect $100 in premium and you have to pay out $102 in claims in 1 year, or claims plus expenses. So this means your combined ratio is 102%. So you invest 100% now, $100 now, and you return 5%. This means your total revenue is going to be $105 and your total obligation is $102. You're still profiting $3. So your company's loss ratios were much lower on average than the industry. Industry average was about 5.9%, and ours was close to 4.9%. 59 and 49, sorry. We used the standard expense ratio because we didn't get expense data, so we were a little bit conservative, and we said we're going to use 30% just so that we could help find our combined ratio. And with that combined ratio, we could calculate the profits based on the premiums that weren't being used to pay out the claims and the expenses. So the total profit that we made over the 5 years was $46.9 million. And so each year the premiums grew, on average 12.86%. And this was because there were new premiums each year. On average it grew about 4.66%. And per policy, the premiums also increased. So two things were happening at once, and this yielded that 12.86% yearly premium growth.
So because we're kind of charging more per policy while already having a really low combined ratio, we kind of saw this as your guys' actuary kind of making a mistake and not really pricing according to the fundamental insurance equation, which is premiums is equal to the losses from claims that you pay out, as well as your LAE, which is the loss adjustment expense. This is essentially the expense of you going out, making sure the claim is not a fraud and how much that claim is actually going to cost. As well as the underwriting expense, which is kind of like the expense ratio we talked about earlier. This is the expense of just having an insurance company be there, paying the actuaries' salaries, making sure the lights are on, and making sure that we have a building. So, and then the last portion of that is also your underwriting profit. Obviously, you want to take some home in. We're a company, we're here to make money. So, those three combined make up what you should be charging for a premium. So, going on, this fundamental insurance equation is used to create two different rate indication formulas. One is a pure premium method, the other one is the loss ratio method. Both these formulas manipulate the fundamental insurance equation in order to get an overall rate level needed. This is how much you should be charging this is how much you should be charging your customers in order to take in how much premium in order to get a desired loss ratio or combined ratio. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to look at the pure premium method quickly. We did not use this one, but just because it is one of the major two. It involves projecting average losses and loss adjustment expenses. It's more simpler and more direct than the loss ratio method, but because it calculates indicated rate, which is essentially how much you should charge, you need to know things like the pure premium and also the underwriting expense per exposure. So they pretty much need to be the same exposures or the same risks in order to use this method. So we quickly decided to use the loss ratio method. The loss ratio method essentially looks at what you're charging now, what your desired combined ratio is, and then how also utilizes your percentage of each dollar given, such as your expense ratio, variable expenses, and what your target underwriting profit is in order to say, okay, from what you're charging now, how much do you have to change that by in order to get where you want to go? So we did that, but in order to do that, we have to make a few assumptions. First is that the loss adjustment expense was included in the loss data that we were given. This could or could not be true depending on the data we were given. We didn't really know since of the lack of data. The other thing is the fixed expense ratio. We took as the industry average expense ratio of 30%. This is mostly because expenses are grouped into two different things. One is the variable expense, one is the fixed. Fixed expenses are things like the building that no matter how many policies you send out are still going to be there at the end. Variable expenses are things like commissions and kind of depend on how much premium you're getting. Because variable expenses are relatively low and because we don't actually know how this company is set up, we kind of just said, okay, we're just going to ignore variable expenses for now. So using the loss ratio method formula, we plugged in target underwriting profit of 5%. This would give us a combined ratio of 95%, which says, okay, we're going to take 5% of every dollar in as just pure profit. This is going to make us way more competitive with the industry because the industry has ratios of about 100. So we're going to be able to decrease our premiums by 81%, by a factor of 81% in order to be competitive with the industry and kind of expand our growth, because the majority of our growth was coming from our rate increases instead of actually people coming into us. So as we'll talk about later, we hope this will kind of change the outlook of the company going forward. So another thing that we used this case competition for was a little reserving. I've always been interested in reserving, so kind of like a little trial. As you can see above, this is an example of a loss development triangle. Essentially, losses don't all kind of happen in 1 year. So let's say losses in 2016, not all of them are going to be paid, not all the losses from 2016 are going to be paid out during 2016 or even 2017. There's sort of a lag. So as you can see in kind of the example in 1988, in the first year, 233 of the losses were kind of realized, while 10 years later there was over 8,706 losses. So over time, those losses kind of add up, and kind of finding the ratio between the different months, you can kind of see what the losses you have now and what losses you expect to have in the future. So I wanted to use the loss development triangle technique, but unfortunately we weren't given all the data to use the loss development triangle technique in its kind of current form. This is because there's no historical claim development data. We were just given data that happened in 2016. So 2012 losses we saw paid in 2016 and ultimate in 2016. But we weren't given paid losses from 2012 and like 2015. So we weren't able to actually make that triangle. But what we were given, which was really interesting, was the paid and ultimate claim data. So the paid and ultimate allowed us to make a month to ultimate link ratio. This essentially says what percent of your paid claims are to your ultimate. So in the first year, maybe 50% of the total amount you expect to pay are going to happen in the first year, and then as you go on, you'll kind of see how it develops into ultimate. And from the month to ultimate link ratio, I was able to make a month-to-month link ratio, which actually had some really fascinating results. So as you can see above the month to ultimate table for 2016, in the first year, in the first 12 months, 48% of your claims come in. And then after 2 years, 57.9% of your claims come in. And until 60 months where you have 100% of your claims coming in, this means that there's no more kind of claims out there that you can pay. You're at ultimate. And what we found was that this actually created link ratios of 1.2 across the 12 to 24 month, 24 to 36, and then 48 to 60. And then once you got to 60, it became 1. It was actually really fascinating because there was absolutely no variation between the link ratios, even if you applied it to the entire data set. So moving forward, we use that to create a loss development triangle essentially. Because the 2012 data in 2016 and 2017 was already past that 60 month, it stayed the same because it had that link ratio of 1. But the other ones got kind of developed by 1.2. So as you can see, 2013, from in between 2016 and 2017, your pay losses from that went from 14.5 million to 17.5 million. But then after that, since they reached that 60-month mark, they no longer developed and they no longer had any losses. So this is essentially estimating your losses, your historical losses as they develop into the future. And from that, we are able to say, in 2017, we expect to pay out 10.5 million. And in 2018, we expect to pay out 8.9 million, 2019, 6.8 million, and then 2020, 4 million. So this goes down because as we go further out into time, some of the years already have developed. Like as I said earlier, the 2013, it just develops at 2017 and then it stops developing. So the 2017 year includes some 2013 development, but 2013 development is not present in 2018, 2019, and 2020. So from that, we saw a great example of money that we're holding now to pay claims in the future. And as we kind of talked about earlier, saw some reinvestment opportunity.
Yeah, so like you said, we're paying it out in the future, so why just let it sit there? We're going to invest it. And typically, most P&C insurers invest in corporate bonds. This is because they're low risk. They're typically low risk. And there's a lot of regulations that are basically say you can't put all of it in equity because you have obligations, you have to pay that out. You can't really gamble people's money away. And we're going to focus mostly on investment grade because, again, they're lower risk investment options. So here's just a little example. This is showing kind of our gain from reinvestment based on the treasury rate. And this treasury rate gives us the minimum possible return on our investment. This is because corporate bonds have a yield over the treasury because corporate bonds have a higher default risk because treasuries are considered risk-free. And that inflated yield is also because there's a hassle of default. They're kind of inflating it even more so you're kind of getting even more of a spread between the corporate and the treasury, which is going to give us numbers higher than all of these. So this is just the minimum. And then once we make this $600,000, it's kind of our money. It's money that we made on reinvestment. We've already paid back our obligation. So this is money that's kind of sitting there. It's ours. We can choose what we want to do with it. We could reinvest it again. So here are some recommendations.
So our overall recommendations is to decrease all our premium that we're currently charging as well as future premium that we're going to charge by a factor of 81%. This will make our prices more competitive to the industry because right now they must be much higher if we're not paying as much out in claims. So what we hope for this to do is kind of switch the growth from raising our rates, our premium growth from raising our rates to actually getting more people to come in. By getting more people to come in, it'll do a few things. One, it'll open up our portfolio to different economic tiers, to those maybe who couldn't afford the product before. It'll also make the company more sustainable, because you can't sustainably keep raising your rates by 7% if your competitors aren't doing the same and still expect to get more people in and not lose people. So although there's been growth in the past, we don't think that that's sustainable. So changing your premiums would kind of make your company more sustainable for the future. The other thing would obviously be diversify into different insurance product offerings. Right now you guys are really only in homeowners insurance, so maybe a big catastrophe like hail would create a ton of homeowners claims. Well, maybe if you switched, added something else like inland marine, which has a lower kind of combined ratio than other P&C insurance lines, you could kind of mitigate the risk of catastrophes, kind of bankrupting your company because you're solely invested in homeowners.